Have you ever heard of a city founded on a trick? A city so rich it made kings jealous, and so powerful it nearly brought Rome to its knees. This isn't just a story of dusty ruins. It's the saga of Carthage, an empire born from the sea, forged in fire, and driven by a promise of revenge. Today we journey back in time to uncover the rise and near triumph of Rome's greatest rival. Our story begins not with an army, but with a refugee. Her name was Dido, a Phoenician princess escaping her tyrannical brother. She landed on the shores of North Africa with nothing but her wits and a handful of loyal followers. The local king, skeptical of these newcomers, offered her a cynical deal. She could have as much land as she could cover with a single ox hide. A cruel joke, right? But Dido wasn't just any princess. She was brilliant. She had the hide cut into impossibly thin strips, so fine they were like thread. Then she laid them end to end, encircling an entire hill. This clever ruse secured the land for her citadel Barca, the hide. From this single deceptive act, the great city of Carthage was born, a city founded on cunning, destined for greatness. From these clever beginnings, Carthage didn't just grow, it exploded. It became the titan of trade, the undisputed lord of the Mediterranean seas. Forget conquest for a moment. This was an empire built on commerce. Their secret weapon? A tiny sea snail that produced a dye of unimaginable value, Tyrian purple. This color was so rare and so vibrant, it became the symbol of royalty and power across the ancient world. A single gram of this dye was worth more than its weight in gold. Carthaginian ships, laden with purple textiles, precious metals from Spain, and tin from as far as Britain, crisscrossed the sea. They established a vast network of colonies and trading posts, creating a commercial empire that was the wealthiest and most envied of its time. Their navy was unparalleled, not for war, but to protect the trade routes that were the lifeblood of their prosperity. Carthage became a shining metropolis, a testament to how wealth, not just weapons, could build an empire. But wealth invites competition. And long before Rome was a major player, Carthage had a formidable rival. Just across the water lay Sicily, a jewel contested by another great power, the Greeks. For centuries, these two titans clashed in a brutal struggle for control of the central Mediterranean. This was a conflict defined by epic naval battles where thousands of ships and tens of thousands of men clashed on the waves. It was a war of relentless sieges, where cities were starved into submission and entire armies were annihilated. This long, grueling conflict, known as the Sicilian Wars, was a crucible. It hardened Carthage, transforming its merchant fleet into a fearsome war machine and honing its military tactics. They were fighting for their economic survival, and in doing so, they forged an army and a navy that would soon be tested against an even greater foe. The lessons learned in Sicily would set the stage for the ultimate showdown. Then came the turning point, a moment of profound humiliation that would change the course of history. Carthage, for all its wealth and naval might, suffered a shocking and decisive defeat against a rising power in the west, Rome. The First Punic War ended in disaster. Carthage lost its possessions in Sicily and was forced to pay a crippling indemnity. The bitterness of this defeat ran deep, but for one man it was personal. His name was Hannibal Barca, a brilliant Carthaginian general who felt betrayed by his own government and cheated by the Romans. In a temple, amidst the smoke of sacrifice, he brought his 9-year-old son, Hannibal, and made him place his hand on the altar. There, he forced the boy to swear a solemn oath to forever be an enemy of Rome, to dedicate his life to its destruction. This wasn't just a father's rage. It was a national trauma channeled into a single chilling promise. A seed of vengeance was planted, and from it a legend would grow. That oath, sworn in childhood, festered into a grand, audacious plan. Years later, a grown Hannibal Barca, now commander of Carthage's armies in Spain, decided to do the unthinkable. Rome felt secure, protected by the sea to the south and by a seemingly impassable barrier to the north, the Alps. They never imagined an army could attack them from behind. But Hannibal was no ordinary general. He gathered a massive force, tens of thousands of infantry, thousands of cavalry, and his most famous secret weapon, a contingent of war elephants. He wouldn't sail to Italy. He would march. This journey, known as the March of Shadows, was a monumental undertaking. He led his army from the shores of Iberia, fighting his way through hostile tribes in southern Gaul, all while keeping his ultimate destination a secret. It was a masterclass in logistics, leadership, and sheer unwavering determination. The world was about to witness a gamble of such epic proportions that it would echo through eternity. Imagine the scene, an army from sun-drenched Africa now standing at the foot of a terrifying wall of ice and rock. The Alps. This is where Hannibal's gamble would either succeed spectacularly or fail catastrophically. The crossing was a nightmare made real. His soldiers, accustomed to warmer climates, faced blizzards, avalanches, and treacherous narrow paths where one misstep meant a 1,000-foot fall. The local mountain tribes launched constant ambushes, rolling boulders down onto the winding columns of men and animals. The elephants, terrified by the cold and the heights, struggled, many perishing along the way. The cost in lives was horrific. Hannibal lost nearly half his army, but after 15 days of this living hell, they emerged from the mountains. They were battered, exhausted, and half frozen, but they had done it. Hannibal had crossed the Alps. He had descended into Italy's heartland like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, appearing at Rome's back door. The war for the fate of the ancient world had truly begun. From a clever trick with an ox hide to a legendary march across the Alps, the story of Carthage is one of ingenuity, ambition, and an unyielding will to survive and dominate. Welcome back to our journey through the epic saga of Carthage. Last time, we left Hannibal poised on the brink of greatness. Today, we witness his masterpiece. This is the story of the Battle of Cannae. Imagine this. A scorching August day in 216 BC, a Roman army, 86,000 strong, the largest they had ever fielded, marches to crush Hannibal once and for all. They are confident, powerful, and walking straight into the most brilliant trap in military history. Hannibal, with a smaller, more diverse force, baits them. He places his weaker Gallic and Spanish infantry in the center, knowing they'll bend. He doesn't want them to break, just to bend like a bow. As the Roman legions pour forward, crashing into this yielding center, they push deeper and deeper, convinced victory is at hand. But on the flanks, Hannibal's elite cavalry has already smashed their Roman counterparts and is now wheeling around. The trap is sprung. The Carthaginian line, which had been a convex bow, now becomes a concave crescent enveloping the Romans. Hannibal's heavy African infantry, held in reserve on the wings, pivots inward, sealing the encirclement. What follows is not a battle, it's a methodical slaughter. By sunset, over 50,000 Roman soldiers lay dead on the field. It's a tactical symphony of destruction, a perfect battle that would be studied by generals for millennia. Rome was on its knees, its legions annihilated, its spirit shattered. The path to the city itself seemed wide open. Hannibal had achieved the impossible. So why didn't he march on Rome? Why did the ultimate victory slip through his fingers? The answer lies not on the battlefields of Italy, but hundreds of miles away, in the marble halls of the Carthaginian Senate. Victory at Cannae should have been the final blow, but Hannibal's campaign had a fatal flaw: his own government. Back in Carthage, a powerful faction, jealous of his success and wary of his family's influence, saw Hannibal not as a savior, but as a threat to their own power. They debated, they delayed, they dithered. Hannibal desperately needed reinforcements and siege equipment to take Rome itself, but the Senate refused. They sent token support, just enough to keep the war going, but never enough to win it. It was a staggering act of political self-sabotage. They feared a victorious Hannibal more than they feared a defeated Rome. And so, the greatest general of his age was left stranded, his army slowly bleeding out in a foreign land, his genius starved by the short-sightedness and political intrigue of his own people. The war he had so brilliantly waged was being lost for him, back home. While Hannibal was stuck in Italy, a new power was rising from the ashes of Rome's defeats. His name was Publius Cornelius Scipio. He was young, brilliant, and had witnessed the horror of Cannae firsthand. But unlike his peers, Scipio wasn't traumatized. He was educated. He spent years studying Hannibal's tactics, dissecting his strategies, learning from the very man who had nearly destroyed his republic. He realized that to beat Hannibal, he had to become Hannibal. Instead of fighting him head-on in Italy, Scipio did the unthinkable. He took the war to Carthaginian territory. First, he conquered their rich holdings in Iberia, modern-day Spain, cutting off a vital source of silver and manpower. Then, with a bold and controversial move, he proposed invading Africa itself. The Roman Senate was horrified. But Scipio's audacity won out. He landed on the shores of North Africa, forcing the Carthaginian Senate to do the one thing they had avoided for over a decade: recall Hannibal to defend his home city. The scourge of Italy was finally going home, not as a conqueror, but as a last desperate hope against a Roman general who had learned all his tricks. The stage was set for the final showdown. The year is 202 BC. On the dusty plains of Zama, about 80 miles southwest of Carthage, two of history's greatest military minds finally meet. On one side, Hannibal, the aging lion, his veteran army worn down by 15 years of war, now supplemented by raw recruits and 80 war elephants he knows are unreliable. On the other, Scipio, the young challenger, leading a disciplined Roman army, supported by the formidable Numidian cavalry that had once been Hannibal's greatest asset. Hannibal plans to use his elephants to smash the Roman lines, just as he had done so many times before. But Scipio has studied his opponent. He arranges his legions not in a solid wall, but in columns, with wide lanes running through them. When the elephants charge, the Roman soldiers simply blow their horns and step aside. The terrified beasts thunder harmlessly through the gaps and are dealt with at the rear. Hannibal's first gambit has failed. The infantry clash is a brutal, grinding affair, but the decisive action happens on the wings. Scipio's superior cavalry drives off Hannibal's, and then, in a perfect echo of Cannae, wheels around to slam into the rear of the Carthaginian line. The encirclement is complete. Hannibal, the master of the trap, is now caught in one of his own design. His army collapses. The battle and the Second Punic War is over. Carthaginian supremacy is broken forever. Even in defeat, Carthage remained a ghost that haunted Rome. The city recovered with astonishing speed, its merchant ships once again dominating Mediterranean trade routes. This prosperity bred paranoia in Rome. One man in particular became the voice of this fear: Marcus Porcius Cato, known as Cato the Elder. He was a stern, uncompromising senator who had fought against Hannibal in his youth. For Cato, the war had never truly ended. He saw Carthage's revival not as a success story, but as an existential threat. He ended every speech he gave in the Senate, no matter the topic, with the same chilling phrase: Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. It became a drumbeat, a relentless propaganda campaign that hammered away at the Roman psyche. He argued that as long as Carthage existed, Rome would never be safe. This relentless message, born from the trauma of Cannae and decades of fear, slowly festered. It transformed a political rivalry into a genocidal obsession. The final tragic act in this long drama was not a matter of strategy or economics, but of pure, unadulterated hatred. An inexorable momentum was building, pushing Rome toward a final terrible solution. The end came in 149 BC. Using a flimsy pretext, Rome declared war for a third and final time. This wasn't a war of equals, it was an execution. A massive Roman army laid siege to Carthage. For 3 years, the city held out, a testament to the raw courage of its people. They melted down statues for weapons, and women cut off their hair to make ropes for catapults. But it was hopeless. In the spring of 146 BC, the legions breached the walls. What followed was a week of horrific street-by-street fighting. The Romans moved from house to house, slaughtering everyone they found. When the fighting was over, the commander, Scipio Aemilianus, the adopted grandson of the man who defeated Hannibal, ordered the city to be systematically demolished. For 17 days, the fires burned. A civilization that had stood for 700 years was wiped from the face of the earth. The surviving 50,000 citizens were sold into slavery. And what of the famous story that the Romans plowed the land and sowed it with salt to ensure nothing would ever grow there again? It's a powerful myth, but likely just that, a story invented much later to symbolize the totality of Rome's vengeance. The truth is chilling enough. They didn't need salt, the fire, the sword, and the complete erasure of a people and their history was a curse far more potent. A great city, a rival to Rome itself, was utterly and deliberately deleted from the map. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible and tragic journey. The story of Carthage is a powerful reminder of how greatness can be brought low, not just by foreign enemies, but by internal division, and how fear can curdle into a hatred that consumes everything. If you found this series enlightening, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history. We'll see you next time.